I make the bones right. True. Right? Come on, Miss Cody, you ready to sing? Let's do some singing. Sorry. And that's cool. They were all singing and stuff in their houses. They're having church, are they? So my jokes are long, today. But we're gonna take this time off we often do. See that cat mice. So Kelly Phelps, she cut her arm, she cut it off. Because they have a balance set right now. Like, key leader, butter knife, and some tea. Picks right up. Yeah, exactly. But being for her, she we need to be able to intentionally get. She's got some eye stuff going on. She's got some disturbing news the other day. The doctor, she had a cancer with. And that's her. That's tough. This church first started. Started in the church. She had this bass band. 5 minutes out every hour. So that's a big thing for her. That's what she ended up doing. There's also a trying to open that out. Quality. Church, of course. Yeah, you want to share that story? I think that's what that was. So he said, oh yeah, they would be able to get under control and do something. Here's what's happening. That's right, man. You have not good ads on it. Yeah, he's got lots to say. I said that. Let's pray. God, I just thank you so much for this body. Thank you so much for this church. My heart's desire is to live for you. That's not just for all those lives. Next week, enchiladas. Mom and a few she did the house, and she said, much better than she. Enchiladas, meat, chicken, and cheese. I think she's beef, whatever. Rice, white rice, ground beef, tacos, taco shells, lettuce, and notes. And I can drop more lines on these, sir. All right. And cheese. So anyway, take a look at this before you leave. Come on, sign up something. You listen to this online between now and next week. I mean, good fellowship. No, that's always my focus. Not just because I eat. No, no. I know. I know what that sounded like. That's not what I meant. Fellowship. Yeah. All right. So today we're talking about the subject that everybody wants, some level, deliverance. So the only way to go into that message is a little rock and roll. Maybe the stakes. You might know. You might not. I want to maybe not. Exactly. That'll change your life, Miss Carol. The fog of a broken heart. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him. He began to be deeply distressed and troubled. Horror and dismay came over him, and he said to them, "My heart is ready to break. Stop here. Stay away." Then he went forward a little. He threw himself on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, this hour might pass him by. Abba, Father, he said, all things are possible to thee. Take this cup away from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. Look at those phrases. That's Mark 14:32-36. Look at those phrases. Horror and dismay came over him. My heart is ready to break with grief. He went a little forward and threw himself on the ground. Does this look like a picture of saintly Jesus to anyone? As dismay came over him, my heart is ready to break with grief. This is not the Jesus resting in the palm of God's hand that we see on posters and picture cards. Hardly that. Mark used black paint to paint this horrible scene. We see an agonizing, straining, and struggling Jesus. We see a man of sorrows. We see a man struggling with fear, wrestling with commitments, and yearning for relief. We see Jesus in the fog of a broken heart. The writer of Hebrews would later pen, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with loud cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. Hebrews 5:7. My, what a portrait. Jesus is in pain. Jesus is on the stage of fear. Jesus is clothed, not in sainthood, but in humanity. The next time the fog finds you, you might do well to remember Jesus in the garden. The next time you think that no one understands, reread the 14th chapter of Mark. The next time your self-pity convinces you that no one cares, pay a visit to Gethsemane. And the next time you wonder if God really perceives the pain that prevails on this desert land, listen to him pleading with the twisted trees. Seeing God like this does wonders for our own suffering. God was never more human than at this hour. God was never nearer to us than when he hurt. The incarnation was never so fulfilled as it was in the garden. As a result, time spent in the fog of pain could be God's could be the hour that we finally see our Maker. If it is true that in suffering God is most like man, maybe in our suffering we can see God like never before. Watch closely. It could very well be the hand that extends itself to lead you out of the fall. Lord, we thank you for the words of Maxwell Cato as it prepares our heart for worship. Lord, I just pray that you would bless the reading of the word today, bless the message given from this book, be your words and not mine. In Jesus' name, amen. Shout it loud. Yeah. Nobody asked. Amen. I don't know your grandpa, but I like it. So, deliverance. Deliverance comes in a lot of different forms, a lot of different ways. It may look different for each and every one of us. Amen. But you have to recognize it when it happens. And we see it all throughout the Old Testament. If we were to look at, I think Ruth is an excellent picture of deliverance. So Ruth is a Moabite. The house of Israel had specific laws written to keep Moabites out. Whatever you do, doesn't matter. Whatever you do, don't be bringing a Moabite up in here. They're stained. They're less than. They don't belong here. Okay. So Ruth is a Moabite from Moab. Uh, Elimelech is a man who has a wife, Naomi, and two sons. And there's a bad drought in the land. And so he goes to Moab as being Israelite, going to Moab. In other words, enemy territory. He's moving in. And God doesn't bless that move because it says it doesn't give us an exact time frame, but it says they're there about 10 years. During that 10 years, both sons married Moabite women. So in Ruth, it's a short book, but Ruth marries one of the sons, and Elimelech, the dad, dies. A bad drought comes and hits there where they are now, and the dad dies. It also says that both of the sons die. So all male children of the male lineage in that family done within a 10-year period, all dead. So Naomi, knowing this doesn't really have a home here in Moab, she's going to go back to Jerusalem, back to Israel, and she's going to go back there. She's from Bethlehem, so she's going to go back there, and she's going to not take the baggage. You know what I mean? They're Moabite women. You're not just going to do that. So she, trying to be nice, says, hey, look, you know what? Because the law back then would be that both of the women would marry the next succession of male children. And if they would, by then, sour a child with that person in the son's name. So I know that sounds twisted and bizarre, but that's the way they did it. So instead of following that law, Naomi says, hey, girls, I'll tell you what, you're still young, you're still pretty, you just go home to your families. You don't need to come back with me. And Orpah, the other one, the sister-in-law, Orpah says, sweet, I was hoping you'd say that, I'm out. And she takes off. And who can blame her, really? She is young. It doesn't say how young, but they don't have any children with these boys. And so Ruth gives us that. What comes out of her mouth next is that famous verse out of Ruth 1:16, and it says, where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And so she vows to her right then that she will go with her back to Bethlehem, and she will be of her people. Now, that's a big deal. It's easy to fly by that in Scripture, but your people will be my people. That's big. I grew up hating these people. They're the enemy, and now I'm saying I'll go live right in the middle of them. Your God will be my God. That's even bigger because you're talking about a pantheist religion society where they had a ton of gods. They had a god for rain. They had a god for harvest. They had a god for anything and everything. And so they had a hard time understanding that one God could do all of that. She says, your God will be my God. And she goes, so that's a win, right? So she goes. I feel like you ever seen a guy posted up in the grocery store selling a chopper or something. But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. So she goes, and they go back, and there's a man by the name of Boaz. Boaz is a good man. Boaz is, in fact, a type and shadow of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. Boaz is a rich man. And so the law there, he was a distant relative of Naomi, mother-in-law. The law then says, as Boaz, to become a kinsman redeemer, he must take possession of all that Naomi owns. Naomi has Ruth. So by law, he would marry Ruth. Not so fast. There's a distant relative that's just a little bit more in the line in front of Boaz. So he says, okay, I don't know if you want to purchase the property that's being passed down. If you're not going to do that, I'm ready to do that right now. So they go to the city gates and they meet with the council and they talk to him and he says, no, I don't have, I don't want to purchase, I don't want it. I got too much going on. I can't do it right now. If you want it, you take it. So Boaz says, cool, I'll do it. Boaz marries Ruth, thereby redeeming Ruth. So that is deliverance. So there's a difference between just getting there and just being delivered. And so the best way I can relate that to you, to my own life, is there's a big difference between being sober and being delivered. And I can't even describe that to you really. You understand where I'm going with it and what I mean by that, because in your life it may be whatever. But there's something for all of us that we need deliverance from. And that's the reality of it is there's a lot of people in churches this morning across the land that don't think they need to be delivered from anything. So I'm here to tell you today this message is for anyone and everyone that ever listens to this online, whether it's today, 10 years from now, everyone within the earshot of my voice, we all need deliverance. We do. That's just reality. We're all broken. We're born that way. You're born with a sin nature. Nothing you can do about it. Thank you, Adam and Eve. Born an enemy of God. I mean, the Bible's clear. So that's being delivered. That's just more than a conqueror. It's right out of Romans chapter 8. That's being more than a conqueror, right? And there's examples like that all over the Scripture. Joseph, brothers threw him in a pit. They've been murdering, sold into slavery, facing false rape charges, blah, 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 blah. Number 2 man in power in the entire known world. So that would be a perfect example of being delivered. Who's another? So Daniel. Daniel's a pretty good example of being delivered, right? So in the 3rd chapter of Daniel, we come across 3 little Hebrew boys. And these 3 Hebrew boys, they're good boys. And so they're so good and they're so sharp in their studies that the king makes them in charge of basically Hebrew relations. They're like foreign relations. Yeah. They stay in the. Thank you, bro. That would be the equivalent of what they are today, the ambassadors that live in the embassy in a foreign land. That's exactly who these guys are, right? And so King Nebuchadnezzar decides that he's going to make this huge statue. And some of his boys are like, man, that's a great idea. I think that whenever we blow the horn, everybody ought to have to get face down and worship the statue. Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, that is a good idea. Let's do that. And so they make a decree. And so these 3 Jewish boys are like, and so Nebuchadnezzar's like, I will kill you. And they're like, we're not going to do that. So so what does he do? He tries to kill him. He turns the furnace up, a walk-in furnace, turns it up how many times hotter? Does anybody know? 7 times hotter than normally is 7. God's perfection, right? Perfect number. And so it turns out it's so hot that the guard approaching to put them in dies from the heat of the furnace while these 3 men stroll on in, right? And Nebuchadnezzar's like, what's going on? He's looking in and says, hey, I thought we just put 3 of them in there. Like, yeah, we did. Well, there's our 4th one. Who's that guy, right? And so that's being delivered. They come out. This is part being delivered. So they survive. Wow, woo, that's great. Deliverance would be they come out not even smelling like smoke. You know what I mean? They don't even smell like smoke. Can't even tell they've been in a furnace. So later in that same book, Daniel is now kind of in the same situation. It's a little different, but Daniel now is forced with, man, I'm going to feed you to the lions. And Daniel says, not really that. Go ahead. And so But he does. He throws him in there, goes the next morning expecting to find a head separated from the carcass, whatever. And he sees Daniel chilling, scratching the mane, you know. Yeah, who's the big cat? You're a silly cat. uh, and so Nebuchadnezzar's blown away by this, right? That's being delivered. Uh, so one more. Rahab. Rahab is a woman of the night. It's clear. She's a harlot. She makes her living at nighttime. And so Joshua, who has recently taken over from Moses. Moses is now dead and buried by the hand of God with a golden shovel somewhere just outside the promised land. And so Joshua steps up and he sends two spies. If you remember, Joshua was a spy 40 years prior, before they started wandering through the wilderness. Joshua and one other are the two that came back and said, yes, we can take the land. The other 10 said no, so they're not. There's a lack of faith, and so they wandered for 40 years, what should have taken 11 days. It was an 11-day journey to get where they were going, 40 years to find it. And so Joshua is the only one that survived that whole trip, and him and the other one that said yes. They're the only two that were the originals now get to go into the promised land. And so Joshua does the same thing. He's now taken over from Moses. He sends two guys in to spy the land. He tells them, especially Jericho. I want you to look at Jericho. They go to Jericho. The king finds out. He's like, where are these guys at? Where are they? Rahab hides them in her apartment. She has an apartment inside the city wall. She hides them while the city looks for them. And when they're leaving, she says, hey, when you take over, when your people come and ransack the city, not if, not it's when. And if you think about it, they're not a trained army. They have zero training as far as combat goes. But they're a group of 2 million vagabonds strolling around. That's a lot of folks. You know what I mean? And so the sight of them coming towards your city would be a horrifying sight. You would know you're in real trouble. So Rahab says, when you take the city, remember me. So what happens? Y'all know the story. First 6 days they walk around, don't say a word, they walk around the city. Also, which would have been terrifying. You know, at night those conversations were like, dude, what are they doing? For real? Like they just really do nothing. They just walk around. The seventh day they walked around. The second time they said, what did you do? 7 times. Then they all start shouting, blow the shofar. Walls come tumbling down. Amen. Rahab is found by the original 2 spies. They go and get her father-in-law, her whole family, bring her out. Her father bring her out, and so she is delivered. Almost. That's a good escape. Deliverance comes. Does anybody know what happens next with Rahab? She marries. She leaves the nightlife. Right? She's been delivered. So she leaves that lifestyle. She marries someone. And I would tell you his name, but my notes are not working. Yeah, the new setup's really working, right? So she marries this gentleman. They have a son. Does anybody know who Rahab's son is? Boaz. The same Boaz we just talked about. How bizarre is that? Because now the deliverance comes because now Rahab, a former prostitute, is in the direct lineage of Jesus Christ himself. She is the great-grandmother of King David. Ruth is her daughter-in-law. Ruth is the grandmother of King David, and so on and so forth. From David, this direct lineage to Christ. How cool is that, right? Isn't that neat? And so then we'll just finish with a little bit of my own story. Deliverance comes from me, and I can only speak for myself, but deliverance came from me when, for the first time ever, it was complete surrender. That's the only way to get deliverance. Because if you're going to take it back and he knows that, he's not going to deliver you from that. That's not deliverance. I begged him. I had put some sober time together, 18 months here, 6 months here, and whenever I went back, it was always harder than before. And so I didn't pray on November 2nd, 2014. I didn't pray to get sober. I've been there before. And that's a grind for a guy like me. That's like nothing the whole time. I'm still a raging alcoholic. I'm just sober, right? I didn't want that life. So when I prayed that God would take the obsession to drink away from me. Take the obsession. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to want one. I don't want to plan for one. None of that. Take the obsession away. Just like that. But I was in a place of complete surrender. I was willing to go, do whatever, whenever, wherever, for however long. I mean, I was ready to go to Korea for 18 months to live in. That's a big commitment, But I didn't care. I knew that something was different after that moment. It was almost like I felt it physically leave my body. That's being delivered. Immediately, I, I don't go to bars, because I'm just not stupid. But and I don't mean that ugly against people who do go to bars. I just mean, you go to a barbershop long enough, you eventually go get a haircut. Yeah, right, exactly. And so that's just my way of safeguarding that part of it. Just I don't even go around. Now, the part about that is that the deliverance part about that is I could. It doesn't bother me a rip, man. If somebody's drinking around me or somebody's probably nothing. It doesn't even faze me. A lot of people when they get sober, they struggle with that a lot. But I could care less. Matter of fact, the first time I used rubbing alcohol after I got sober, I was like, dear God, I used to drink that. I didn't drink rubbing alcohol. I wasn't that sick. But the cheap stuff I bought smelled just like it. You know what I mean? So whatever it is that you need deliverance from, that's all it's going to take is surrender. You got to get to that place where you give it, and you give. Once you give it, it's gone. There is no more taking it back. There is no more. Now, again, I'm smart enough to realize I'm human, right? And this guy, I don't itty bitty pretty committee up here, man. Like not very good. So I'm smart enough to say to myself, I have to remember that I'm weak. I'm human. I'm weak. So I get asked by a lot of spouses, man, I can't believe you're still working with my husband. You know, everybody else has left. I can't believe you're still around. I said, well, he talks about, hey man, I've been there. Somebody did that for me. Somebody did never gave up on me into life. If you're already living righteous and you're on track to, whether you are or not. If you're already doing that, great, man. Lend a hand. Pull somebody up. Teach them to disciple. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. We gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much, first and foremost, for the love that you give us. We don't deserve any of it. We don't deserve even our righteous acts are filthy rags, Lord. We understand it. We get that. And I just pray, Lord, that you would guide us and direct our steps to be better than they were today. Let us be better tomorrow than we are today. Help us to always strive for that. We want to be comparative with each other. We want to look at what somebody else has and does, the way they act. I just want to be better tomorrow than we was today. For us to have that attitude, to chase those who as if the time up is time. We love you, Lord. We thank you. In Jesus' name. Amen. All right, let's go. So I'm going to now flip through all my notes. Paying attention. That's great. That's what's up. I know that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Lord, we thank you so much.